go over something that I think is neglected a lot, and that's small chords. Now, I feel like a lot of time with some music, I mean, whether you're into jazz or metal or whatever, when it gets to the part of doing chords, usually if you're not doing just power chord, it's almost like a pissing contest for who has more interesting, bigger chords. And I'm guilty of it too. I use, big, ridiculous chord voicings all the time. But something that really gets neglected, in my opinion, are really small, focused chords, like 3-note basics. So the ones I'm going to use this week are 7th chords, major, minor, and dominant 7ths, because those are, if you have any training in theory, those are the 3 most used chords ever, pretty much. But I mean, whereas a lot of guys, even myself, like when I was learning chords, you learn, in terms of jazz, basic movable shapes. You got your major 7, minor 7, dominant 7. Now, a lot of that stuff, I feel like a lot of times you can get too busy, or a lot of those shapes, it's hard to move around really quick. I mean, after a while, those shapes become really easy to move around. But for a lot of like the fast-paced stuff, the smaller chord shapes honestly are easier, and they come out sounding, it's the same, you're using the same notes. And it's really cool because another thing it allows you to do is add on to those chords. So if you've ever had the idea of like, oh, that note sounds cool over this chord, like over a major 7, say like a, whatever, like a sharp 11, something like that. Because it's such a small chord, it gives you the ability to add on to that. So like I said, the 3 I'll use, I'll start off with the major 7. I'll just give you the shapes, it's easy. And for all of these, I use my middle finger as the root note. So saying this, we'll just do it on A, your low A string, or your low E string, 5th fret. Major 7 shape, you're just hitting your 1st, 3rd, and 7th, so you're cutting out the 5th, or the fat of a basic 7th chord. The note that really doesn't give you any definition in what key you're in. So you're just going to play A on your low E string, so your 5th fret. Then you play the 4th fret on your A string, which depending on you look at D flat or C sharp. And then you're going to play the 6th fret on your D string. So it's either G sharp or A flat. So you got your major 7, you get your 1st, your 3rd, and your 5th. Now this is movable, because the intervals are the same for the first 4 strings, it's just a 4th. You can move it between your low E string and your low A string. It's going to be a major 7 no matter where you put it. Dominant 7, all you do is take that top note, the 6th fret on your D string, move it back to the 5th fret. You got your dominant 7, so major 3rd, minor 7th. And then for a minor 7, you're going to take that same thing, you're going to drop your pointer finger, at least I'm using my pointer finger, from the 4th fret on the A string down to the 3rd fret. So you've got major, dominant, and minor. You can use these, it's easy to move around. As terrible as it is, it's easy to make it sound like you know what you're doing if you throw those chords around a lot. You can take virtually any jazz standard and you can use those chords, like I said, you can add on to them. So say you like your major 7. It's just adding my pinky into it, doing different little note selections. But it's a really interesting idea if you can sit there. So it's something to mess around with. I feel like it's something that, like I said, is really unused. And it's a very basic lesson. Just go through some songs that you know. Even if you're writing a song it's something cool to put in place with power chord. I personally almost never use power chords. So you're playing something. Just replace it with those chords. I personally think that sounds a lot cooler because you're adding that seventh in there. And something that really is underused. I think the interval of a fifth is overused a lot in a lot of music. I mean, to put it in drop D and you're just playing straight across power chords, you're playing your fifths and octaves. So you can play around with that. Also play around with using those chords and using open notes, which is something I personally love. I'm adding a ninth in there. Gives you almost like toes and sounding animals as leaders, ethereal kind of sound. But mess around with that, playing with songs or anything like that you're writing. Mess around with using those chords instead of power chords. Even songs you already use, just see if you like it. I mean, that's just my personal opinion on things. That's all music really is opinions. What you think sounds good and what doesn't. But for me, it's something I feel a lot of people either don't mess around with. I mean, a lot of people know those chord shapes. They just kind of look past them. They start getting into the bigger chord stuff, which again, like I said, I'm guilty of all the time. But it is something to look at before you just kind of blow it off. Like, all right, I learned them, just forget them. Play around with them. Play around playing over them. Play around with replacing them into songs you already know. Like I said, whether they're jazz standards or just cool progressions, mess around with using those chords because they're really helpful. And they're really good for writing like skeletons for songs. Like if you go through and write a song, really basic, and you go back through, practice using those instead, then you can go over and elaborate over the chords later on. But I hope that helps you guys in some way.